Right now, engineers are designing a ship that will freeze you halfway to death so you can cross the stars. Your body cooled, your heartbeat slowed to almost nothing, your muscles wasting by the day, cosmic rays tearing through your sleeping brain. We built it to survive the distance. Your mind may not. How long can a frozen mind last out there before it stops being yours? If that pulls you in, follow along and subscribe. Close your eyes. We begin. Imagine standing at the base of a rocket that will never bring you home. You're not flying to Mars. Mars is the neighbour's yard. You're aiming at another star. And the moment you understand how far that is, your stomach drops through the floor. The closest star to our sun is a faint red speck called Proxima Centauri. It hangs in the southern sky, so dim you need a telescope to catch it. That speck sits about 25 trillion miles away. Written down, the number means nothing, so shrink it. Picture the entire gap between the Earth and the Sun squeezed into a single footstep. On that scale, the walk to Proxima Centauri would still stretch across an entire ocean. Light is the fastest thing that exists. It needs more than 4 years to cross that gap, and we are far slower than light. We crawl. The quickest machine we have ever launched is a small probe now racing away from the Sun. Point it at that red star and set it loose, and it would arrive in roughly 70,000 years. Not 70. 70,000. That is the wall every star dream slams into. A human life is a candle. The journey is a night longer than our whole species has been alive. So engineers started asking a stranger question. What if the traveller did not have to be awake for it? What if you could switch a person off, like a lamp, and switch them back on the moment the ship arrived? That is the sleeper ship. A vessel carrying living people who are barely living at all. Hearts slowed to a whisper. Bodies cooled to the edge of stillness. Minds sealed somewhere between sleep and something darker, waiting for a shore they may never touch. On paper it fixes everything. A sleeping crew eats almost nothing. They never grow bored. They never age the way we dread. 10 sleepers need a sliver of the food, water and air that 10 waking travellers would burn through across the decades. The ship shrinks. The cost drops. The impossible starts to look merely insane. And here is the detail that keeps researchers up at night. We are not guessing whether this can be done. Nature already does it. Every winter, animals across the planet power their bodies down and survive months of cold and hunger without twitching a muscle. Their trick is real. It works. We simply do not own it yet. The dream is ancient. The science is finally catching up. Space agencies now pour real money into freezing crews for long voyages, and the early findings are solid enough to be frightening. Every dream hides a price, though, and this one hides a savage one. A body left still does not politely wait. It starts to come apart, quietly, from the inside, long before the ship ever reaches another sun, and the first thing to fail is the very thing that would let you stand up and walk off that ship alive. Lie perfectly still for 1 month, and you would step out of bed a weaker person than you crawled in. This is the first betrayal of the sleeper ship, and it begins almost at once. Muscle is not a permanent thing you own. It is a living tissue your body constantly judges. Use it, and the body keeps it. Stop using it, and the body decides it is dead weight and quietly tears it down for parts. You feel a small version of this every time you break a leg. The cast comes off after 6 weeks, and the limb inside has shrunk, thin, soft, a pale copy of the other one. Now imagine that happening to your entire body at once for months while you sleep. The numbers from real space missions are brutal. Astronauts floating in orbit where nothing weighs anything can lose up to 1/5 of a muscle's mass in a single month. Push the mission longer with no protection, and the loss can climb toward half. Half. The strong young pilot who boarded the ship would wake with the legs of someone barely able to lift their own feet. The muscles that vanish fastest are the quiet ones you never think about. The deep muscles along your spine that hold you upright. The ones in your calves that push you off the ground with every step. On the ship they have nothing to fight. No weight to carry, no floor to press against. So the body writes them off. The engineers designing these ships know this. It terrifies them. A sleeper who arrives at a new world only to collapse the instant they try to stand is not an explorer. They are cargo. So the plans include a grim solution. Machines that jolt the sleeping muscles with pulses of electricity, forcing them to twitch and clench even though the mind that owns them is switched off. Picture a body in a pod, still and pale, its legs flinching on a schedule set by a robot. All night, for years, fighting a slow war against its own disappearance. Even that may not be enough, because muscle is only the surface of the problem. Muscle you can shock, muscle you can rebuild with months of hard work after you wake. There is something underneath the muscle that behaves far worse, something that does not shock back to life, something that, once it drains away, may never fully return, no matter how hard you train. Reach down and press your thumb against your shin. Feel that hard ridge under the skin. On a long enough sleep, that ridge grows dangerously thin, and its strength leaks out into your blood like sand pouring from a broken hourglass. Your bones are not the dead scaffolding you think they are. They are alive. Every day, tiny crews inside your skeleton tear old bone down and lay new bone in its place. Over and over. Forever. On Earth, gravity keeps them honest. Every step you take sends a jolt up through your legs, and your bones read that jolt as a command. Stay strong. You are needed. Take the gravity away, and the command stops coming. The crews that build bone grow lazy. The crews that break it down keep working, and your skeleton begins to eat itself. The same way your muscles do, only slower and far more permanent. The rate is steady and merciless. In orbit, an astronaut can lose more than 1% of their bone every single month. It sounds small, it is not. Stretch it across a long voyage and the loss stacks up. After 6 months, some travellers have lost a fifth of the bone in their hips. A fit adult in their 30s can end up with a skeleton that matches an elderly patient with advanced bone disease. Think of what that means on a ship far from any hospital. A sleeper who trips while stepping off the pod could snap a hip like dry chalk. Not a bruise, a break that, out there, could kill them. There is a second danger, and it hides in plain sight. When bone dissolves, it does not simply vanish. It melts into the blood. All that lost calcium, the mineral that once made you rigid and upright, floods into your veins and pours down toward your kidneys. Picture a river carrying too much sediment. Eventually it clogs. In the body, that sediment can harden into stones inside the kidneys. Sharp, jagged, agonizing stones. On Earth, that means a trip to the emergency room. On a sleeper ship crawling between stars, there is no emergency room. There is only a sleeping body, unaware, growing quietly more fragile with every mile. This is the deeper terror of stillness. Muscle can be shocked and rebuilt. Bone is stubborn. Even after astronauts return to Earth and train for years, some of them never win back everything they lost. The skeleton keeps a grudge. So the sleeper ship faces a cruel math problem. Every extra month of sleep saves food and air, and every extra month of sleep quietly weakens the traveller who has to walk out at the end. Sleep too long, and you arrive as a passenger too brittle to explore the world. You crossed an ocean of darkness to reach. The engineers stare at this problem and keep circling back to the same source of hope, the one loophole nature left open. Because there are animals out there, ordinary animals, who solve all of this without a single machine. They shut their bodies down for months. Their bones and muscles wait, and when spring comes, they get up and walk away as if nothing happened. How they pull that off is one of the great unsolved mysteries of biology, and cracking it might be the only thing standing between us and the stars. Somewhere in a den right now, a bear is doing something no human doctor can explain. It is winter. The bear has not eaten in months. It has not drunk. It has not moved. Its heart, which pounds at maybe 50 beats a minute when the animal is awake and angry, has slowed to a lazy handful of beats. Its body has cooled. Its whole engine has dropped into a low humming idle. This is torpor, a deep controlled shutdown that animals slide into on purpose. And the astonishing part is not that they survive it. The astonishing part is that they wake from it perfectly fine. A human forced to lie still for that long would come out wrecked. Wasted muscle, crumbling bone, blood clots, bed sores. The bear comes out lean but strong, stands up, shakes off the winter, and lumbers back into the forest as if it simply took a long nap. Smaller animals go even further. A ground squirrel curls into a ball and lets its body temperature fall toward freezing, close enough that its blood should turn to slush. Its heart nearly stops. For weeks at a time, this tiny creature sits at the very doorway of death, then strolls back through it in spring unharmed. Something inside these animals is protecting them. Some chemical signal, some ancient program written into their cells, tells the body to hold on. Do not waste the muscle. Do not drain the bone. Do not clot the blood. Wait. We do not have that program. Or, if we do, we have forgotten how to run it. That is the prize scientists are chasing. If a bear can shut down for a winter and wake up healthy, the reasoning goes, then the machinery to do it might be buried in our own biology too, switched off by millions of years of evolution. Find the switch, and you unlock the stars. Researchers have started hunting the exact molecules that flip an animal into torpor. In the lab, they have already found tiny clusters of brain cells in mice that, when triggered, drop the animal into a cold, still hibernation-like state on command. A dial in the brain. Turn it, and the animal powers down. Turn it back, and the animal wakes. Sit with that for a second. A dial in the brain that controls whether a living thing runs hot and hungry or cold and still. If a version of that dial exists in us, then the sleeper ship stops being science fiction and becomes an engineering problem. But a mouse is not a person. A bear is built for this. Its body carries defenses ours has never needed. Copying that into a human is like handing someone a bird's feathers and expecting them to fly. The parts alone do not make the miracle, and there is a darker question underneath all of it. When a bear sleeps through winter, we assume its mind simply switches off. We assume there is nothing in there but silence. We might be wrong about that, and if we are wrong about the bear, we might be terribly wrong about what waits inside a sleeping human mind, drifting in the dark for years. Before we get there, though, we have to answer something simpler, because the strangest part of this whole story is that we already cool human beings down on purpose. We do it every day. In hospitals, a patient is rushed through the doors with a heart that has stopped, and the first thing the team does is make them colder. This sounds insane until you understand why it works, and it is the reason the sleeper ship is not a fantasy. It is a scaled-up version of something doctors already do. When your heart stops, the clock starts. Your brain, starved of oxygen, begins to die within minutes. That short window is why every second of a rescue matters so much. But there is a trick that widens the window. Cool the body down, and everything inside it slows. The brain's hunger for oxygen fades. Cells that would have died in minutes can hang on far longer. Doctors call this therapeutic hypothermia. They lower a patient's temperature by just 5 to 10 degrees. That is all, a handful of degrees. And in that small chill, the body enters a slower, safer state, buying precious time until the real treatment can begin. This is not experimental. It has been a standard tool in serious hospitals for decades, used on trauma patients and on people whose hearts have stopped. Protocols for it hang on the walls of major medical centres. Nurses and doctors do this on ordinary shifts. A cooled human being, held on the edge between life and death, waiting to be brought back. Now you can see the bridge. If a small drop in temperature can slow a dying body enough to save it, what could a deeper, longer, carefully controlled cooling do? Could you slow a healthy body down on purpose, not for minutes, but for months, and carry that person across the emptiness between stars? That is the exact leap the engineers are trying to make. They are not inventing torpor from scratch. They are taking a proven hospital technique and asking how far it can be pushed. The same basic idea. The same gentle cooling. Just longer. Much, much longer. The comparison they love to point at is the cold that saves lives every day. The idea is that a spacecraft could carry the machinery to chill a crew into that slowed state at the start of a voyage, keep them there through the long dark middle, and warm them back up near the end. The traveller would close their eyes at launch and open them at a distant world, having slept through the crossing. It is a beautiful idea. It is also where the beauty runs out, because everything doctors do with therapeutic cooling, they do for a very short time, a few hours, a day, maybe a little more. They cool a patient, treat them, and warm them back up while everyone watches, ready to react the instant something goes wrong. Nobody has ever kept a human in that cooled, slowed state for months. Nobody has even come close. There is a hard limit on how long we have dared to hold a person in the cold, and it is far shorter than any journey between stars. Cross that limit, and you leave the map entirely. You step into a region no human has ever survived, where the body does things we cannot predict, and where the mind may go somewhere we do not want to follow. That limit has a number, and it is smaller than you would ever guess. The longest a human has ever been held in that cooled, slowed sleep is about 1 week. 7 days. That is the wall. That is the entire edge of everything we know. Sit with how small that is. Doctors cool trauma patients because the treatment works, and because they have never needed to hold anyone under longer than a week. Once the crisis passes, they warm the patient and wake them. There was never a reason to push further, so nobody did, which means the whole map of human cold sleep ends at 7 days. Everything past that line is blank, unknown, never tested on a living person. Now look at what the sleeper ship demands. The teams designing crewed torpor missions are not asking for a week. They are asking for 90 days, 180 days, 6 full months of continuous sleep, just to reach somewhere as close as Mars. A voyage to another star would need not months but years, maybe decades, maybe longer than a human has ever lived. The gap between what we have done and what we need to do is staggering. We have a footpath that runs 7 days into the dark, and we are trying to build a highway that runs for a lifetime. Every step past that 7-day wall is a step into pure mystery. Will the heart tolerate months of running slow? Will the blood, thick and sluggish in a cooled body, begin to clot and choke off the brain? Will the sleeping mind stay quiet? Or will something stir in there that we cannot see and cannot stop? Nobody knows. And there is only one way to find out, which is to send someone past the wall and watch what happens. That is a terrifying experiment to run on a human being, so researchers are inching toward it carefully. They are testing new ways to cool the body faster and gentler. One method pumps cold through the nose, chilling the blood on its way to the brain, dropping the body into its slowed state without the shock of older techniques. They are studying the animals that already do this, trying to steal their secrets. They are building the machines and the pods and the monitors, piece by piece, for a voyage no one has yet dared to take. The push is real. Space agencies now fund serious programs aimed squarely at this problem, because they understand a simple truth. Without long sleep, deep space stays locked. The distances are too large. The supplies are too heavy. The human mind is too fragile to sit awake and sane through years of nothing. So the wall has to fall. 7 days has to become 7 months, and then 7 years, and then longer. Every plan to leave our little corner of space runs straight through this single obstacle. But before a body can survive the long cold, someone has to get it into the cold in the first place, and back out again alive. That turns out to be its own kind of nightmare. The act of cooling a human being to the doorway of death, and then daring to open that door again, is a machine problem, a chemistry problem, and a gamble all at once. And the most dangerous moment of the entire voyage may not be the years of sleep. It may be the few minutes when they try to bring you back. To sleep between stars, you first have to be lowered into the cold by a machine that does not care whether you live. Look at the designs the engineers have drawn, and they look exactly like the pods from old space movies. A row of open cradles side by side in a shared chamber. No lids sealing each person into a private coffin, just bodies laid out in the open, watched over by robotic arms and a web of sensors that never blink. Getting a person into that state is a delicate act. One method threads thin tubes up through the nose, feeding cold down toward the brain, chilling the blood at its source and coaxing the whole body into its slowed state. As the temperature falls, the heart slows. Breathing softens, the mind fades. The person sinks, degree by degree, into the deep hold that will carry them across the dark. And here is where it becomes a knife's edge. There is a narrow band of temperature where this works. Stay too warm, and the body wakes too easily, burning through the food and air the whole mission was built to save. Fall too cold, and you cross a line no one comes back from. The heart, chilled past a certain point, stops for good. The blood thickens towards slush. Ice, the true enemy, begins to whisper at the edges of the cells. Somewhere between those two dooms sits a thin, safe zone. A body has to be held inside that zone. Not for an hour, not for a day, for months, for years, automatically, in the middle of empty space with no doctor standing by, no team ready to leap in when a reading drifts wrong. Think about what that asks of a machine. A cooling system that runs flawlessly for a decade, holding a living human on a razor's edge, adjusting for every small shift in the body, with no one awake to fix it if it fails. A single glitch does not mean an alarm and a nurse. It means a traveller quietly slipping too far one way or the other, toward waking too soon, or toward a cold that never lets go. The engineers know they cannot leave every sleeper unwatched. Their earliest designs keep at least one crew member awake at all times, rotating through the long voyage, standing guard over the sleeping bodies. A living pilot for a ship full of the almost dead. That single detail carries its own horror, and we'll return to it, because a lone human watching over frozen bodies for years is its own slow catastrophe. For now, hold on to the machine, the cooling that has to be perfect, the narrow band that has to hold, the pods lined up in the dark, each one balancing a person on the line between deep sleep and death. Even if the machine works flawlessly, even if the cold holds steady and true, there is a second problem waiting underneath it. A body in a pod is still a body. It still needs fuel to keep its cells alive. It still makes waste. It still lies motionless against a hard surface for years on end. You cannot ask a sleeping person to eat, so how do you feed something that will not wake to swallow? A sleeping traveller will not eat for years, yet every cell in their body is still quietly starving. Even slowed to a crawl, life costs fuel. The heart still beats, faint as it is. The brain still hums somewhere down in the dark. Cells still repair themselves, still burn a trickle of energy just to keep from falling apart. Cut off that fuel and the body simply dies in its sleep, no matter how perfect the cold. But the sleeper cannot chew, cannot swallow, cannot lift a cup. So the ship has to feed them another way, straight past the mouth and into the blood. Doctors already do this on Earth for patients too sick to eat. A line runs into a vein, and through it drips a custom fuel of sugar, fat, protein and vitamins, mixed to keep a person alive without a single bite of food. On the sleeper ship, that same line would run for the length of the voyage. A slow, steady drip of survival, delivered by a machine into a body that never knows it is being fed. Waste is the ugly twin of feeding. Whatever goes in must come out, and a sleeping body cannot rise to deal with it. So more tubes, more lines, a quiet plumbing running beneath the beauty of the pod, carrying away everything the body discards across years of stillness. Then comes the problem of lying still itself. Press your own body against a hard floor and hold it there. Within an hour it aches. That ache is your tissue warning you that blood is being squeezed out of the skin caught between bone and surface. Shift your weight, and the warning fades. A sleeper cannot shift. Left alone, the trapped skin and flesh begin to die, opening deep wounds that rot inward. Bed sores. On a years-long voyage they could eat down to the bone. There is worse. Blood that does not move begins to pool and thicken in the still veins of the legs. It can knot into a clot, and a clot that breaks free can travel up into the lungs or the brain and kill in an instant. A sleeping traveller would never feel it coming, so the pod cannot simply hold a body. It has to tend one. Robotic arms turning the sleeper on a schedule, easing the pressure, working the limbs, machines watching the blood, thinning it, keeping it flowing. A whole invisible staff of devices doing the work a human body normally does for itself without a thought. Picture it. A still figure in the dark, fed by a drip, cleaned by a machine, turned by a robot arm, its silent legs flexed on a timer, its blood stirred so it will not choke the heart. Kept alive by a swarm of machines across a journey longer than a human career. Cargo that must be nursed for a decade or it spoils. And suppose every machine works. Suppose the body is fed, cleaned, turned, and kept whole all the way to a distant star. There is still one question no drip and no robot arm can answer. Is anyone home? We keep saying the sleeper is switched off, like a lamp. But a brain is not a lamp. And what happens inside that cooled, sleeping head across all those silent years may be the most frightening part of this entire voyage. We keep calling it sleep. But we do not actually know what happens inside a mind held in the cold for years. When you fall asleep at night, your brain does not switch off. It roars, it sorts memories, spins dreams, runs a whole hidden life while your body lies still. Sleep is not silence. Sleep is a different kind of noise. Now cool that brain down. As the body's temperature drops, the electric storm inside the skull slows. Brainwaves stretch out, long and lazy. Push the cold far enough, and the activity fades toward a faint, flat hum, so quiet that on a monitor it can look almost like nothing at all. Almost, and that word is where the horror lives. We assume a deeply cooled brain is a switched-off brain. We assume the lights are out and no one is inside, but we have never held a human mind in that state for months and asked it, afterward, what it felt. The longest we have ever cooled a person is a handful of days, and even then, we cannot climb inside their experience. We can only read the machines. So a terrible possibility hangs over the whole idea. What if the mind does not fully go dark? What if, buried under the cold, some thin thread of awareness remains, not thinking clearly, not forming memories the way you do now, but present? A dim ember of you, glowing somewhere in the frozen quiet, aware that time is passing and unable to move, speak, or wake. The animals give us no comfort here. When a ground squirrel drops into its winter state, we assume its mind goes blank. But we cannot ask the squirrel. We do not know if hibernation is a dreamless void or a long, strange twilight of the mind. We simply decided it must be nothing because nothing is easier to imagine. The engineers designing these ships treat sleep as an off switch because they have to. A sleeper who is truly gone, truly absent, wakes at the destination having felt no time pass at all. That is the dream. Close your eyes at launch, open them at a new world, and the years between simply never happened for you. But if the ember stays lit, the dream curdles into a nightmare. A person could lie in that pod for a decade with a sliver of themselves awake in the dark. No sight, no sound, no way to mark the passing years except the slow, dreadful sense that they are passing. A mind, alone with itself, at the bottom of the cold, for longer than most friendships last. We do not know which it is, and there is no gentle way to find out. The only test is to send a mind into the deep cold for months, and see what it says when it comes back, if it can say anything at all. Here is the strangest part. A brain running at a crawl does not experience time the way you do. Its clock is broken, and that means even the question of how long the sleeper suffers, or dreams, or drifts, has no clean answer. Because inside a mind that's slow, in a dark that total, time itself starts to come apart, and what a brain builds to fill that emptiness may be the loneliest thing a human being has ever felt. Lock a healthy person in total darkness and silence, and within hours their own mind starts inventing a world for them. We learned this on Earth, long before we dreamed of freezing anyone. Float a volunteer in a warm, dark, soundless tank, cut off from every sight and sound and touch, and something eerie happens. The brain, starved of anything real to chew on, begins to make things up. Colours bloom behind closed eyes. Voices whisper out of the silence. Shapes move in a room that has no room. The mind cannot stand emptiness, so it fills it. Now stretch that from hours into years, and drop the whole thing to the bottom of the cold. A sleeping traveller on a starship gets no sunrise, no sound of a door, no hand on the shoulder to say the night is over. There is only the dark, and the faint machine hum, and whatever the brain decides to build out of nothing. If any thread of awareness lingers down there, it has nothing true to hold on to. So it may spin its own reality, out of memory and fear and static, and that reality would have no clock. A brain running slow and cold does not count time the way yours does. Stretch a mind thin enough and a minute can feel like an hour, or an hour can vanish like a blink. A sleeper drifting through a self-made dream might live what feels like a lifetime in a single frozen year, or lose whole years in what feels like a single breath. The inner clock, unhooked from any real sunrise, simply floats free. Picture the loneliness of it. A dream you cannot wake from. A story with no ending, looping and shifting, built by a mind with no company but itself. No way to know if you have been under for a week or a decade. No morning coming to break the spell. Just you, and the dark and the endless soft machinery of a ship carrying your body toward a star you may never live to see. This is the quiet danger nobody puts on the brochure. The sleeper ship promises to spare you the boredom and horror of staying awake for a journey longer than a human life. But it may replace that horror with a stranger one. Not the emptiness of a switched-off mind, but the crushing solitude of a mind left alone with itself for years, unmoored from time, unable to wake. We do not know how a human would come out the other side of that. Would they step from the pod refreshed, remembering nothing? Or would they carry the weight of 1,000 invented years behind their eyes, changed in ways no scan could measure? The mind, though, is only half the war. While the sleeper drifts in the dark, dreaming or blank, the ship around them is under attack. A silent, invisible assault that never pauses, never tires, and cannot be stopped by any wall we know how to build. It pours in from every direction at once. It passes straight through steel, as if the hull were open air, and it is aimed, whether it means to be or not, at the one thing on that ship we most need to protect, the sleeper's brain. The moment a ship leaves the shelter of Earth, it sails into a storm you cannot see, cannot hear, and cannot stop. Here on the ground, we live at the bottom of two great shields. Our planet wraps itself in a magnetic field, an invisible cocoon that deflects the worst of what space throws at us. Above that sits a thick blanket of air. Together they catch nearly all the deadly particles racing in from the wider universe, so that down here, bathed in sunlight, we barely feel a thing. Fly past those shields, and the protection ends. Out in deep space, there is nothing overhead. No magnetic cocoon, no blanket of air, just the naked cosmos, and a constant sleet of high-speed particles pouring in from every direction at once. Scientists call it galactic cosmic radiation. It is the shrapnel of the universe, flung out by exploding stars and violent events far across the galaxy, screaming through space at nearly the speed of the light. It has been raining across the void for billions of years, and a starship carries its crew straight into it. The measurements from real missions are sobering. A crew crossing open space soaks up radiation every single day, at a rate that would set off alarms in any building on Earth. Day after day, month after month. It never stops, because the source is not a place you can fly around. It is everywhere. The whole sky is the source. The cruel twist is that you cannot simply build a wall against it. These particles are not like the gentle warmth of sunlight, easily blocked by a curtain. They carry so much energy that they punch straight through the metal skin of a spacecraft as if it were paper. Add more shielding, and you add weight the ship cannot afford, and even then the fiercest particles slice right through. There is no easy armour, there may be no armour at all. Now remember who is inside, not an awake astronaut who can retreat to a shielded corner of the ship during a burst, or cut a mission short and race home. A sleeper, motionless, unable to move, unable to react, unable to feel the storm passing through their body. For years that invisible rain falls on a person who cannot so much as flinch, and the target it finds most easily is the softest, most precious thing aboard, the brain, the very organ the whole voyage exists to carry safely to another world, the seat of memory, of personality, of the self. It sits there in the dark, still and cool, while the wreckage of dead stars sweeps through it without pause. We tend to imagine radiation as a fog, a haze that dusts everything evenly and gently. That picture is far too kind. This is not a fog. This is a hail of tiny bullets, each one carrying enough energy to tear through whatever it hits. And when you do the math on what that hail actually does to a human body over years, cell by cell, the number is almost impossible to believe. Because it is not that some of your cells get hit. Given enough time out there, every single cell in your body takes a direct strike. Again, and again, and again. Out in deep space, given enough time, there is no cell in your body that escapes being hit. That sentence sounds like drama. It is arithmetic. Scientists studying the radiation of deep space worked out how often those racing particles find a target inside a human body, and the answer is relentless. On a long voyage, a fast proton passes through every cell you own about once every 3 days. Heavier fragments strike less often, every few weeks, every few months, but they come too. Picture your body as a vast field of grass, billions of blades standing quiet in the dark. Now picture an endless crowd walking across that field, day and night, year after year, in every direction at once. At first only a few blades get stepped on. Give it enough time, and there is not a single blade the crowd has not crushed underfoot, over and over again. That crowd is the cosmic rain, and the blades are your cells. Most of the time, a strike does small damage. A particle tears through the delicate coils of information inside a cell, the long molecule that holds the instructions for keeping you alive. It snaps a strand, it scrambles a letter. On Earth, your body shrugs this off, because it runs a tireless repair crew that finds the breaks and stitches them shut, thousands of times a day, without you ever knowing. But the sleeper ship stacks the odds against you. The hits never stop because the storm never stops. And a cooled, slowed body may run its repair crews slower too, letting damage sit unfixed for longer. Break a strand faster than you can mend it and the errors pile up. A scrambled instruction here, a misread letter. There, cell by cell, year by year, the flawless code you were born with fills with typos. Most typos do nothing. Some kill the cell outright, which the body can absorb, but a rare few do something far worse. They flip a healthy cell into a rogue one, a cell that forgets the rules and begins to multiply without end. That is how radiation seeds cancer. And a body soaking in cosmic rain for years carries that risk in every organ at once. The awake astronauts on shorter trips already worry about this. Their mission planners treat radiation as one of the great barriers to crossing space, a threat serious enough to shape the entire design of a voyage. Now stretch a short mission into a journey of years and lay a defenseless sleeper in its path, unable to shorten the trip, unable to hide, unable even to know it is happening. There is a strange mercy in the pattern, though. The lightest particles, the fast little protons that make up most of the storm, do the least harm with each strike. They are the gentle ones, the needles, not the swords. Because riding inside that same storm are heavier things. Rarer, slower to arrive. But when one of them hits, it does not prick a single cell and move on. It carves a tunnel, straight through a whole line of cells, one after another, leaving a trail of ruin behind it like a cannonball tearing through a crowd. And a single one of these, passing through the wrong part of a sleeping brain, could erase something that can never grow back. Somewhere in the cosmic storm ride the monsters, and it only takes one to change you forever. The gentle protons are the many, but scattered among them are heavier particles, the shattered cores of heavy elements like iron. Flung across the galaxy by dying stars, they are rare. Out of every 100 pieces of the storm, only a handful are these giants. Yet they carry a punch so enormous that, small in number as they are, they deliver close to half of all the damage a traveller soaks up out there. A sliver of the particles doing the lion's share of the harm. The reason is speed and mass together. A proton is a bullet. One of these iron cores is a cannonball moving at nearly the speed of light. When a proton hits a cell, it pokes through and leaves. When an iron core hits, it does not stop at one cell. It punches straight through, and through the next, and the next, boring a long tunnel of destruction across a whole column of tissue before it finally spends its fury. Scientists have watched the tracks these particles leave behind. A single one can rip through a line of cells like a train tearing through a packed crowd, flattening everything directly in its path. One particle. Dozens or hundreds of cells destroyed in a single instant, in a single straight line. Now think about where that line falls if it passes through a brain. Your brain is not a solid lump. It is a forest of delicate cells wired together in patterns so fine and so specific that they hold everything you are. A memory is not stored in one place like a book on a shelf. It lives in the connections between cells, a web spun across the tissue. Punch a tunnel through that forest and you do not just kill some cells, you cut wires, you sever connections that took a lifetime to form. The awake traveller at least has a body that fights back a little, a metabolism running full speed, repair systems on high alert. The sleeper lies cold and slowed while these cannonballs pass through their skull for years. Each one carves its silent tunnel. Each one snips a few more threads of the web, and the mind that owns that brain has no idea it is being unstitched. We cannot shield against them either. The lighter particles are hard enough to block. These heavy cores are worse, because when they smash into a wall of shielding, they can shatter it into a spray of smaller fragments, sometimes making the danger deeper rather than stopping it. Adding armour can backfire. There may be no material we can carry that truly keeps them out. So the sleeper crosses the dark with a brain fully exposed to a slow, invisible barrage of the deadliest particles in the universe. Not many of them, just enough. One tunnel at a time, over years, through the one organ we most need to arrive whole. The question that should chill you is simple. If radiation carves quietly through a sleeping brain for a decade, what steps out of the pod at the other end? We have a clue, and it comes from a laboratory, from small animals given a taste of that same cosmic fire, and from what happened to their minds afterward. Take a healthy animal, expose its brain to the kind of particles that fill deep space, and something disturbing happens to how it thinks. Scientists cannot send people into cosmic radiation just to study the damage. So they do the next thing. In laboratories on Earth, they recreate those heavy, fast particles and aim them at the brains of mice, then watch how the animals behave in the weeks and months that follow. The results are a warning written in fur and whiskers. The exposed mice grow forgetful. Set them a simple task, one they should master easily, and they stumble. They fail to recognize things they have seen before. Their memory, sharp before, turns leaky and unreliable. The radiation does not just kill brain cells, it damages the fine wiring between them, the very connections that let a mind learn and remember. It changes their mood too. Many of the exposed animals grow more anxious, more fearful, more easily rattled. The damage reaches into the parts of the brain that manage emotion and steadiness, and leaves the animal jumpier and less itself, not simply dumber, different. Researchers found that these changes can linger long after the exposure ends. The brain does not always bounce back. Circuits stay broken. The animal carries the damage forward, a quieter, shakier version of what it was. Now carry that finding onto the sleeper ship. An awake astronaut who felt their memory slipping could at least notice it, report it, fight it, take shelter during the worst bursts. The sleeper can do none of that. They lie cold and still while the cosmic fire works on their brain for years, snipping the wiring of memory, tugging at the circuits of mood, and they never feel a thing. There is no alarm inside a sleeping mind that rings when a connection is cut. So the traveller who closes their eyes at launch, sharp and steady and whole, might open them at a distant star as someone subtly unwound. Memories full of holes, a temper on a hair trigger, a personality shifted a few degrees off its old course by a decade of invisible bullets, and here is the cruelty. They would have no way of knowing. The person best placed to notice the change, the traveller themselves, is exactly the person the change happened to. This is the deepest threat radiation poses to the sleeper ship. It does not only risk your life through cancer, it risks you. The specific pattern of thoughts and memories and habits that make you a single, particular person could be quietly rewritten by particles from dead stars, and no one would be there to see it happen. At this point, the whole idea looks doomed. A body wasting away, a skeleton dissolving, a brain under fire, a mind possibly awake and alone in the dark. Every part of the plan seems to be failing at once, and yet the scientists have not given up, because they suspect there may be a strange and beautiful twist hidden inside the sleep itself. A possibility that the very act of shutting the body down, the thing that seemed so dangerous, might turn out to be the shield that saves it. The question is whether sleeping through the storm makes the damage worse, or whether it just might make it better. Here is the twist nobody expects. The deep cold that seemed so deadly might be the very thing that protects you. Think back to why radiation harms a body. A particle strikes a cell and breaks something, and then a cascade of tiny chemical reactions spreads the damage further, like a spark landing in dry grass. Much of the harm comes not from the first hit, but from the fire it starts, the storm of unstable molecules that rip through the cell afterward. Now cool that cell down and slow it to a crawl. Every reaction inside it slows too. The spark still lands, but the grass is damp. The fire spreads sluggishly, if at all. A body held in deep torpor, its chemistry idling near a standstill, may simply take the same hit far more gently than a warm, racing, wide-awake body would. This is why researchers studying hibernation and space travel keep circling back to a thrilling idea. The sleep might be a shield. Animals in their winter shutdown have shown a surprising toughness against radiation, weathering doses that would badly hurt them while awake. If a slowed human body shares even part of that toughness, then torpor stops being only a way to save food and air. It becomes armor. The traveller survives the storm not in spite of being asleep, but because of it. Space scientists have noticed this. They point out that a single deep sleep could soften many of the great dangers of the voyage at once. Less food burned, less boredom, and madness. And now, maybe, less harm from the radiation that no wall can block. One trick, quieting several nightmares together. But nature rarely gives a gift without a catch, and the catch here is a question we cannot yet answer. Does a slowed body age more slowly, or does the damage simply pile up unrepaired? Two futures split apart. In the hopeful one, the cold protects and the slow repair keeps pace, and the sleeper arrives having barely aged at all, the years passing over them like water over a stone. In the darker one, the hits keep landing, the tired repair crews fall behind, and the traveller ages in hidden ways even as they lie still, arriving worn down from the inside by a decade of quiet, unmended wounds. We do not know which future is real, because we have never held a person in that state long enough to watch. The animals hint at hope. The physics hints at danger. The truth lies somewhere in the untested dark past, that 7-day wall, waiting for the first traveller brave or desperate enough to cross it. So the sleep may save you, or may slowly unmake you. And for now, the two possibilities sit side by side, both fully alive. But even if the cold shields you perfectly through every mile of the crossing, there is one moment the shield cannot help you with. One moment when all the danger of the entire voyage compresses into a few short minutes. Not the launch, not the years of dark, the waking. Because bringing a frozen human being back to life is where the whole beautiful plan is most likely to kill them. If the sleeper ship ever murders its crew, it will most likely happen in the final hour, at the very moment of coming home to warmth. We spend so much fear on the years of cold that we forget the hardest trick is the reverse. Getting a body safely out of the deep freeze is even more delicate than getting it in, and it has to work perfectly on the first try with no second chance, far from any help. Think about what has to happen. A body chilled and slowed for years must be gently warmed, its heart coaxed back up to full speed, its blood set racing again, its whole engine restarted after the longest idle a human has ever endured. Every system has to wake in the right order, at the right pace together. Rush it, and everything shatters. The heart is the great danger. A cooled heart is a fragile heart. Warm it too fast, or let it warm unevenly, and it can slip into a wild, useless quiver instead of a steady beat, a chaos that pumps no blood and ends a life in moments. Doctors who cool patients on Earth guard the rewarming with obsessive care, raising the temperature by tiny degrees, watching every heartbeat, ready to shock the heart back into rhythm the instant it falters. Now strip away the hospital. Strip away the team of watchers. On the ship, a machine must do all of it, flawlessly, perhaps with only one groggy crew member nearby, perhaps with no one awake at all. The rewarming that a whole medical team babysits on Earth has to run itself in the silence of deep space. There is a second trap in the thaw. Warm a body unevenly and different parts wake at different speeds, straining against each other. Picture a frozen pipe in winter. Warm it too fast and the ice inside turns to water and steam before the rest is ready and the pipe bursts. A body re-warmed carelessly faces its own version of that stress, tissues and vessels waking out of step, tearing at the seams, and the person this is happening to is helpless. The sleeper cannot feel their heart stumble, cannot call for help, cannot do anything but lie there while a machine decides, minute by minute, whether they will open their eyes at a new world or never open them again. The whole voyage, every mile survived, every hazard endured, comes down to those final minutes at the threshold of waking. It is a bitter shape for a story to take. To cross an ocean of darkness, to survive the wasting and the radiation and the long cold, only to die at the shore, in the act of trying to stand up and live again. This is exactly why the earliest ship designs refused to leave the sleepers entirely alone. Someone, they decided, has to be awake. A guardian to watch the machines, to catch the failures, to stand ready when a fellow traveller is pulled back from the cold. But that solution opens a door into a horror all its own, because keeping a single human being awake, alone, on a ship of sleeping bodies, for months or years on end, does something to that person. We know it does. We have watched it happen. And the mind of the one left awake may be the first thing on the whole ship to break. On a ship full of the sleeping, the loneliest job in the universe belongs to the one who is not. The engineers reached this conclusion reluctantly. A ship of sleepers left utterly unattended is a ship betting everything on machines that never fail across years of deep space. That bet is too dangerous. So the early designs keep at least one crew member awake at any time, standing watch, ready to act when something goes wrong. The sleepers rotate through the cold in shifts, and a waking guardian rotates with them, always one pair of open eyes on board. On paper it is sensible. In practice it is a slow torment. Picture the reality of that watch. You are awake, alone, inside a metal shell crawling through absolute dark. Around you lie your crewmates, still and pale in their pods, fed by tubes, breathing so slowly you have to stare to be sure they breathe at all. They are present. They are also gone. You can look at their faces, but you cannot talk to them. You cannot share a meal, a joke, an argument, a single human moment. They are company, the way a photograph is company. Beyond the hull there is nothing. No new sight, no new sound, no visitor, no weather, no change. Just the same walls, the same hum, the same sleeping faces, the same view of a star that grows closer so slowly you cannot see it move. Days blur into weeks, blur into months, each one identical to the last, and home is no help. On a voyage between stars, Earth is so far away that a message sent back takes years to arrive and the reply takes years to return. You cannot call anyone. You cannot ask for comfort. Any question you send into the dark will be answered long after you needed it. For all practical purposes, you are the only conscious mind for trillions of miles in every direction. Human beings are not built for that. We are social animals to our very core. We are shaped by faces and voices and touch, by the constant small feedback of other minds. Take all of that away, and something in us begins to fray. We have known this for a long time, from sailors and prisoners and explorers, from anyone forced into deep isolation for too long. The mind, left alone, turns on itself. The bitter irony is that this loneliness is the exact thing the sleeper ship was supposed to solve. The whole point of freezing the crew was to spare them the horror of staying awake and sane through a journey longer than a human life. And yet the plan still demands that someone stay awake to guard the rest. The problem the ship was built to escape reaches out and grabs at least one person anyway. So how long can a single mind hold together under that weight? How many months? How many years before the isolation starts to bend it? We are not guessing at this. We tested it. Not in space, but on the ground, where we sealed a small group of ordinary, healthy people into a locked box and refused to let them out for the length of a journey to Mars and back. What happened to them over those long months tells us exactly what the dark does to the human mind. And it did not wait until the end to show its teeth. 6 healthy men walked into a sealed chamber. The door closed behind them, and it did not open again for 520 days. This was a real experiment, run on the ground to rehearse the psychology of a journey to Mars and back. No leaving, no fresh air, no family, no surprise. Just 6 men, a cramped set of rooms built to feel like a spacecraft, a fixed supply of rationed food, and a calendar longer than a year and a half stretching ahead of them. Mission Control could watch and talk, but on the long simulated crossing they grew distant and slow to answer, mimicking the silence of real deep space. The point was to see what confinement does to the mind over the true length of such a voyage. And the crew, to their enormous credit, made it through. They followed routines. They exercised. They ran their experiments. One learned a new language to pass the time. One kept a journal. From the outside, it looked like a triumph of human endurance, and in many ways it was. But underneath the success, the scientists watching them saw the strain seeping in. There is a pattern that shows up again and again in long confinements, and it appeared here too. Researchers call it the third quarter effect. It is a curious thing. People do not sink into their lowest mood at the hardest, most dangerous moment. They sink later, once the halfway point is behind them, when the novelty is long dead and the end still feels impossibly far. The middle stretches out. Hope thins. The mind sags in that long third quarter, no longer excited, not yet able to see the finish. The strain did not fall evenly across the crew either. Most of the men coped well, but a small number carried most of the trouble. When the scientists tallied the friction, the tension, the conflicts that flared inside that box, they found that just 2 of the 6 accounted for the overwhelming share of it. In a tiny sealed world, A couple of strained minds can set the mood for everyone. There is no room to walk away, no door to step through to cool off. The tension has nowhere to go, so it circles. And this was the gentle version. 6 men, a year and a half, constant contact with a support team doing everything possible to keep them steady. Company all around them, other faces to talk to, other voices in the dark. They were never truly alone. Now strip that away. Replace the 5 awake crewmates with 5 sleeping bodies. Stretch the year and a half into a decade. Remove the support team behind a wall of years. What was a manageable strain for 6 men with each other's company becomes something else entirely for one person with no one. The locked box taught us that the human mind bends under long confinement, even in the best conditions. But the sharpest lesson was not about arguments or mood. It was about something quieter and more fundamental. Something that began to slip away from the crew almost without their noticing. Their grip on the difference between night and day. Their sleep. The very rhythm that keeps a mind whole. Deep inside that sealed chamber with no sun to guide them, the crew's sleep quietly fell to pieces. Your body runs on an ancient clock. Every day, sunlight resets it, telling your brain when to feel awake and when to feel sleepy. That rhythm is so woven into you that you never think about it. You simply feel drowsy at night and alert in the morning, and the sun keeps the whole system honest, day after day after day. Take the sun away, and the clock starts to drift. Inside the locked box, the scientists track the crew's sleep with care, and over the long months they watched it slowly decay. The men slept less soundly. Their sleep grew shallower, more broken, less refreshing. As the confinement dragged on, they moved less and less, sinking into stillness, and the stillness fed back into worse sleep. A slow spiral downward, month by month, that most of them barely felt happening. One crew member drifted the furthest. Cut loose from the sun, his internal clock stopped keeping a normal day. It stretched, settling into a rhythm a little longer than the true day, so that bit by bit he slid out of step with everyone else. His nights wandered later and later. Before long he was awake while his crewmates slept and sleeping while they moved about. A man living on his own private time, quietly out of sync with the only other people in his world. Think about how isolating that is, even with a crew around you. Now imagine it with no crew at all. The lone guardian on a sleeper ship has no sun, no dawn, no dusk, no other waking person to anchor their day. Just the unchanging hum of the machines and the endless artificial light or dark of the ship. Without those natural cues, their clock would drift the same way, only with nothing and no one to pull it back. Their sleep could scatter across the day in fragments. Their sense of morning and evening could dissolve entirely. A mind whose sleep has come apart is a mind in trouble. Poor sleep frays your patience, clouds your thinking, drags down your mood, and loosens your grip on reality itself. Stack that up over years, and the guardian is not just lonely. They are exhausted in a way sleep no longer fixes, thinking through a fog that never lifts, growing stranger to themselves with every drifting week, and they are the one person trusted to watch over everyone else, the one who must catch a failing pod, manage a crisis, guide a crewmate safely back from the cold. We are asking a sleep-starved, sun-starved, deeply isolated human to hold the lives of the whole crew in their hands across years, alone. The locked box showed us the mind bending, but those 6 men always had each other, and they always knew the door would open on a fixed day. The Guardian has neither. No companions, no certain end in sight. Just the dark, the hum, the sleeping faces, and their own unravelling clock. So what happens when you take away even the comfort of a crew and leave a single mind to keep watch over the almost dead for longer than anyone has ever tried? That is where the real horror of the sleeper ship begins to show its face. The oldest fear about long space travel was never the machines. It was what a human mind might do to itself when left awake too long in the dark. This fear has a name in old stories: space madness. The idea that a person sealed in a metal shell, far from everything they love for longer than the mind can bear, might slowly come undone. And it is not just a story. It is one of the very reasons scientists began chasing the sleeper ship in the first place. If the crew could sleep through the crossing, the reasoning went, then no one would be awake long enough to lose their grip and do something terrible, to themselves or to everyone else on board. That fear tells you something important. The people who design these missions take seriously the possibility that an isolated human, pushed far enough, becomes a danger. And the Guardian, the one soul kept awake to watch the sleepers, sits at the exact centre of that danger. Consider the power that Guardian holds. They tend the pods. They manage the machines that feed and warm and cool their sleeping crewmates. In their hands rest the survival of everyone on board. Now imagine that mind slowly fraying across years of loneliness, drifting sleep and unbroken silence. A mind that begins to see things in the dark. A mind that starts to resent the sleepers, so peaceful, so absent, while the Guardian suffers alone. A mind that stops thinking clearly at all. There is no one to check them. No crewmate to notice the change and step in. No support team close enough to help in time. The Guardian could sink into despair or paranoia or something darker, and there would be no one awake to see it happening or to stop it. The very isolation that breaks them also hides the breaking. We have seen hints of this even in far gentler settings. People pushed into deep isolation can turn strange, suspicious, hostile, or hollow. Take the most extreme version of that. Put it in a person holding the lives of a sleeping crew, and you have a nightmare no engineer can fully design around. You cannot build a machine that repairs a lonely human heart. Some plans try to soften it by rotating the watch, waking one sleeper as another goes under, so no single person carries the whole weight. But even a shared burden is a heavy one, and waking a mind only to plunge it into months of solitude before sending it back to sleep may scramble it in its own way. There is no clean solution, only different shapes of the same lonely danger. So the sleeper ship faces a mind-bending contradiction. It cannot run safely without a waking Guardian. And a waking Guardian, left alone long enough, becomes a threat to the very safety they were meant to protect. The cure and the disease wear the same face. And there is one final cruelty waiting for whoever stands that watch. A cruelty that turns the loneliness from painful into truly disorienting. Alone in the dark, with no sun, no seasons, no company, and a sleep that has scattered into fragments, the Guardian would slowly lose the ability to answer the simplest question of all. How long have I been here? Ask the loneliest traveller in the universe how long they have been awake, and the terrifying answer is that they may have no idea. Time is not something you measure with your mind alone. You lean on the world to tell you how much has passed. The sun rising and setting, the seasons turning, meals, work, weekends, the faces of people growing a little older around you. Strip all of that away, and your sense of time does not simply grow fuzzy. It comes loose and starts to float. We have seen this happen to people cut off from the normal rhythms of the world. Sealed away from daylight and clocks, they lose the thread. They guess that an hour has passed when it has been 3. They think a day has gone by when it has been 2. Without the steady drumbeat of the outside world, the mind is a poor judge of how long it has been living. It drifts, and it does not even know it is drifting. Now place that broken sense of time on the sleeper ship, and it cuts in 2 directions at once. The sleeper, if any thread of awareness lingers in the cold, has no way to measure the years. A decade in the dark could feel like a single endless night, or a single night could stretch into what feels like a lifetime. When they wake, there would be no inner record of the journey. The years would be a blank they simply have to be told about, and asked to believe. The Guardian has it worse in a way because they are awake for all of it, living each empty day, yet unable to tell the days apart. Without a sun, without seasons, without a single other waking soul to say good morning, the Guardian's sense of time would fray to nothing. Have I been on watch for 2 years? Or 7? Was that memory last month? Or long ago? A person can lose the shape of their own life when nothing outside them keeps score. Imagine the horror of that softly. Not a sudden terror, but a slow one. The creeping realization that you no longer know how far you have come or how much of your life you have spent in this metal shell. Your own past turns misty. The future has no landmark. You float in a grey, timeless middle, unable to say whether the worst is behind you or still ahead. For a social creature who lives by memory and anticipation, that untethering from time is a special kind of madness all its own. And this is the state the whole mission depends on. We are asking a person adrift from time, uncertain how long they have suffered, to keep faith that an end is coming and to hold themselves together until it does. That is a staggering thing to ask of any mind. But suppose they manage it. Suppose the Guardian endures, and the sleepers survive, and the ship finally arrives at its distant star. Suppose everything works, there is one last blow waiting, and it is perhaps the heaviest of all. Because while the travellers slept and watched and drifted, the universe did not wait for them. And when they finally look back toward the place they came from, they will find that the cruelest cost of the voyage was never their own suffering. It was everything they left behind. You survive the cold, the radiation, the loneliness, the thaw. You open your eyes at a new star, and then you understand that everyone you have ever loved is gone. This is the quiet heartbreak buried in the whole idea, and no clever machine can fix it. The sleeper ship is slow, even at the wild speeds we might one day reach. The nearest star is years away, and a real voyage between the stars could stretch across decades, or a century, or more. While you lie frozen, unaware that time does not pause for you. It only pauses inside your pod. Out in the wider world it keeps pouring forward at full speed. So think about what waits at the far end. You step from the pod, your body barely aged, a few grey hairs at most, your face nearly the same as the day you launched. But back on the world you came from, lifetimes have passed. The friends who waved you off are long dead. The children you might have known have grown old and died too. The house you lived in, the streets you walked, the songs you knew, all of it swept away by the tide of years you slept through. You are a living fossil, freshly woken into a future that has no place set for you. Even a message would break your heart. If you tried to call home, your words would crawl across the emptiness for years before anyone heard them, and any answer would take years to crawl back. You would be speaking to ghosts, sending greetings to people who died long before your voice arrived. The conversation itself would span generations. There is no talking with home. There is only shouting into a well so deep the echo never returns in your lifetime. This is the trade the sleeper accepts, whether they fully grasp it or not. To reach the stars, you do not just leave a place. You leave a time. You step out of the river of ordinary human life and let it flow on without you, and when you climb back in at the far shore, it is a different river entirely, filled with strangers, running through a world you do not recognize. You gained a star and lost your entire world to get it. And here the story turns from the body to something deeper, something no measurement of muscle or bone or radiation can capture. Because a person is not only a body that survives a voyage. A person is a thread of memory and habit and love, stitched to a particular time and a particular set of people. Cut all of that, and something essential is severed even if the flesh arrives intact. Which forces the hardest question this whole journey has to offer. We have spent all this time asking whether the body can survive the crossing, whether the muscle holds, the bone holds, the brain holds, the mind holds. But suppose it all does. Suppose a living, breathing human steps off that ship at the end of 100-year sleep. Is it still the same person who lay down at the start? Does the self, the particular you that thinks and remembers and feels like you, actually survive the freeze? Or does the person who wakes only wear the face of the one who left? To answer that, we have to look at where memory and identity truly live, and at a strange, controversial attempt already underway on Earth to freeze a human mind and carry it into the future. To know whether you survive the freeze, you first have to know where you keep the thing that makes you you. Here is a truth that surprises most people. Your memories are not stored like files in a drawer. There is no tiny room in your head holding a folder marked with your name. Instead, everything you are lives in the wiring. Your brain holds billions of cells, and each one reaches out to thousands of others, forming a web of connections so vast it dwarfs every road and wire humans have ever built. A memory is a path through that web. A habit is a groove worn into it. Your whole personality is the exact shape of those connections, spun slowly across your entire life. That changes the question completely. A person is not really a lump of tissue. A person is a pattern. The particular arrangement of all those links is the self. Two brains with the same cells but different wiring would be two different people. Keep the cells alive but scramble the wiring and you have not saved the person at all. You have only saved the meat. This is the heart of everything. When we ask whether a sleeper survives the crossing, we're really asking whether that delicate pattern survives. Not whether the heart beats again. Not whether the lungs fill. Whether the precise web of connections that holds your memories and your character comes through the years unbroken. And that web is fragile beyond belief. The connections between brain cells are finer than anything you can picture, thinner than the thinnest thread, packed together in numbers beyond counting. The information they carry is not written in stone, it is written in the gentlest possible way, in the delicate reach of one cell toward another. Disturb that reach, break those bridges, and the memory they held is simply gone, the way a song vanishes when you smash the instrument. So the real enemy of the sleeper ship was never boredom, or hunger, or even radiation in the abstract. The real enemy is anything that damages the pattern, anything that reaches into that impossibly fine web and starts snapping threads. Lose enough of them, and the body might still arrive, warm and breathing, while the person who owned it never does. This is why the deepest form of long sleep, the one that tries not just to slow a body but to stop it completely, runs into a wall more frightening than any we have met so far. Because to truly halt a brain, to freeze it solid so it can wait out the centuries, you have to do the one thing almost guaranteed to shred that fragile pattern. You have to turn a warm, wet, living brain into something cold and hard. And in the crossing from soft to solid, a monster appears. A monster made from the most ordinary substance on Earth, the same stuff that fills your cells and your blood and most of your body. Water. Freeze water, and it does something beautiful and deadly. It forms sharp, growing crystals, and inside a freezing brain, those crystals go to work on the very web that holds everything you are. Before we face that monster, though, we have to understand why anyone would try to freeze a human brain solid in the first place. Because on Earth, right now, people already do. At this very moment, in quiet buildings around the world, dozens of human beings float in tanks of cold, waiting to come back to life. They are not asleep, they are not slowed, they are stopped, as completely as we know how to stop a body. These are the people who chose cryonics, the practice of freezing a human at the moment of death in the hope that some future age will know how to heal them and wake them. To their families they are not gone. They are paused, resting in the deepest cold, betting everything on a tomorrow that may or may not come. The idea is the boldest cousin of the sleeper ship. Where the ship tries to slow a traveller across a voyage of years, cryonics tries to halt a person across a voyage of centuries through time itself. And the logic behind it is genuinely powerful. The power comes from cold. As you chill anything down, everything inside it slows. Chemistry crawls. The slow rot that breaks down a body after death grinds nearly to a stop. Push the temperature low enough, down past anything found in nature on Earth, to more than 300 degrees below zero, and the molecules that make up a body barely move at all. At that depth of cold, a body is held almost outside of time. The decay that would ruin it in days is stretched out across thousands of years. That is the promise. A brain cooled that far could, in principle, wait. Not for a week, not for a voyage, for 1,000 years or 10,000, its precious pattern frozen in place, unchanging, while the world outside races ahead. It is a message sent into the future, written not in ink but in flesh, and the cold costs almost nothing to keep. The tanks that hold these frozen bodies use a special liquid so cold it stays that way on its own, quietly boiling away and being topped up, no electricity required to hold the deep freeze. A body could rest there, patient and still, long after everyone who remembered it has turned to dust. You can see why the dreamers of deep space look at this and feel their pulse quicken. If a mind can truly be stopped and stored for centuries, then the crossing between stars stops being a problem of endurance and becomes a problem of storage. You would not need a traveller tough enough to survive 100 years of slow sleep. You would only need to stop them cleanly, carry them across the dark and start them again on the far shore. But the whole beautiful idea rests on one enormous assumption, that you can freeze a brain without destroying the pattern inside it, that you can take that fragile web of connections, cool it past 300 degrees below zero, and have it come through unharmed. And that is exactly where the dream meets its monster, because when you freeze the water that fills a brain, it does not politely harden in place, it grows, it forms crystals with edges like knives, and those crystals push out through the tissue, tearing the delicate wiring apart from the inside as they spread. To freeze a brain the ordinary way is to shred the very thing you are trying to save. The thing most likely to erase you forever is the same thing you drink every day. Water fills your body, it packs your cells, floods your blood, saturates the soft tissue of your brain. While it stays liquid, it is gentle, a warm sea in which the machinery of a life floats and works. But cool it past freezing, and it transforms into something with teeth. When water freezes, it does not simply stiffen, it rearranges itself into crystals, and those crystals take up more room than the liquid did. They grow, they spread, they form hard, sharp structures that push outward against everything around them. You have seen the power of this. Water seeps into a crack in a rock, freezes and splits the stone. Water sits in a pipe through a cold night, freezes and bursts the metal. That same force, small and patient, is strong enough to break rock and steel. Now bring that force into a brain. As a brain freezes the ordinary way, ice crystals begin to form inside and around its cells. They grow along the delicate spaces between the wiring, and as they grow, they shove, they tear, they puncture the thin membranes that hold cells together and slice through the fine threads that link one cell to another. The web of connections, the very pattern that holds your memories and yourself, gets ripped apart by 1,000 growing blades of ice. This is the monster. Not exotic, not alien. Just frozen water, doing what frozen water always does, inside the most delicate structure in the known universe. Freeze a brain without a plan, and you do not preserve a mind. You destroy it while turning it hard, and you're left with a solid block that holds the shape of a person, but none of the pattern that made them real. You can feel the trap closing. To carry a mind across the centuries, you want the deep cold, because the deep cold stops decay and holds the pattern still. But reaching that cold means passing through the freezing zone, where the water inside turns to blades and shreds the pattern on the way down. The cure and the poison are the same journey. The cold that could save you can only be reached by crossing the ice that destroys you. For a long time, this seemed like a dead end. How do you cool a brain to the depth that preserve it without ever letting its water freeze into those killing crystals? It sounds like a contradiction. Get the water cold enough to stop, but never let it become ice. And yet nature offered a clue, and clever scientists chased it down. There is a way to cool water past freezing without it ever forming crystals at all. A way to make it go hard and still and safe, skipping the ice entirely. The trick is to turn the water not into a crystal but into a glass. A smooth, solid, structureless glass with no sharp edges to shred anything, holding the pattern gently in place across the long cold. It is one of the strangest and most hopeful ideas in all of science, and it might be the only thing that lets a mind survive the deepest sleep of all. There is a way to freeze a brain so cold that time nearly stops, yet form no ice at all. And it may be our single best hope of carrying a mind through the centuries. The trick has a name: vitrification. It means turning something into glass. And the difference between glass and ice is the whole secret. Ice is a crystal. Its molecules lock into a rigid, orderly grid, and to build that grid they grow those sharp, spreading blades that tear tissue apart. Glass is different. Glass is a solid with no order at all inside it. Its molecules frozen in a jumbled, random mess, exactly as they were when the liquid stopped moving. Picture honey cooled so fast and so hard that it turns solid without ever forming grains. Smooth, uniform, no crystals, no blades, just a still, clear, solid holding everything gently in place. To make a brain do this, scientists first flush much of the water out of the tissue and replace it with a special cocktail, a kind of medical antifreeze. This cocktail refuses to form ice. Then they cool the whole thing fast, plunging it down past 300 degrees below zero so quickly that the liquid never gets the chance to build crystals. Instead of freezing into ice, it hardens into glass. The pattern inside, the fragile web of connections, is locked in place without being shredded. And this is not just a dream on paper. In laboratories, scientists have already done it with small pieces of brain. They have taken thin slices of the exact region that handles memory and learning, treated them with the anti-ice cocktail, cooled them into glass at those brutal temperatures, and then examined the tissue. The fine structure survived. The delicate wiring, the thing that holds the pattern, came through the deep cold intact. On a small scale, the monster of ice was beaten. Once a brain is glass, something remarkable becomes possible. At that depth of cold, the molecules inside barely move. Chemistry all but stops. The slow decay that ruins tissue over time is paused so completely that the brain could, in theory, wait almost forever. 100 years. 1,000. 10,000. The pattern held frozen in glass, patient and unchanging, while the universe rushes on outside. For the sleeper ship, this is the ultimate version of the dream. Not a body slowed and struggling through a voyage of years, wasting muscle and soaking up radiation the whole way. A mind turned to glass at the start, stopped completely, carried across the deepest dark and brought back at the far shore. A true pause button for a human being. But you already know that nothing in this story comes without a catch, and the catch here is enormous. Turning a thin slice of brain into glass is one thing. Turning a whole human brain into glass evenly, all the way through, is a challenge of a different order entirely. And even if you manage it, even if you get the whole brain safely into glass, you still have to face the hardest step of all. You have to bring it back. And warming a brain made of glass without cracking it to pieces or letting the ice creep back in may be the most dangerous thing anyone has ever tried to do. Freezing a mind into glass is hard. Waking it again may be nearly impossible. Start with the freezing itself, scaled up. In a thin slice of brain, the anti-ice cocktail soaks in easily from every side, reaching every corner in moments. A whole brain is a dense, solid mass, and the only way to deliver the cocktail is through its blood vessels, the same fine network that once carried its blood. You have to push the anti-ice fluid through that entire tangle and have it reach every tiny region evenly, miss a spot, leave one poorly reached corner with too much plain water still in it, and in that corner ice forms anyway. The blades return, the pattern tears, and the cocktail that saves the tissue from ice is itself a poison. In the amounts needed to stop crystals from forming, these chemicals are toxic. So you are threading a needle between two dooms once again. Too little, and ice shreds the brain. Too much, and the cocktail itself poisons it. Getting the balance perfect through every last fold of a whole human brain is a task of staggering difficulty. Now suppose you manage all of that. Suppose you get a whole brain safely into glass. You still have to reverse everything, and the reversal is where the real terror lives. A brain made of glass is brittle, like any glass, and glass hates uneven temperature. Warm one part faster than another, and the stress builds until the whole thing cracks. You've seen it happen. Pull a cold glass dish from the freezer and pour hot water on it, and it shatters in your hands. A frozen brain warmed carelessly could crack straight through, splitting the pattern along jagged lines, destroying in an instant what the deep cold spent centuries protecting. There is a second trap on the way up. As a glass brain warms, it has to pass back through a dangerous zone of temperature, and in that zone, the very ice you avoided on the way down can suddenly begin to form. The glass can start crystallizing as it thaws, growing the killing blades at the last moment, right when you thought you had won. To beat it, you have to warm the entire brain fast and evenly, all at once, all the way through, without cracking it and without letting the ice awaken. No one yet knows how to do that to a whole human brain, so the glass brain sits at the edge of possibility, tantalizing and unreached. We can freeze small pieces and keep their pattern. We cannot yet freeze a whole brain and bring it back whole. The people floating in those cold tanks today are a bet that the future will solve the thawing they cannot. They went into the glass trusting that someone someday will find the way out. Faced with how brutally hard it is to save the living brain and revive it, some scientists have started asking a wild and unsettling question. What if you did not need to revive the original brain at all? What if the flesh does not matter, and only the pattern does? What if you could read the frozen map of a mind, copy it perfectly, and rebuild that person somewhere else entirely, without ever thawing the brittle glass at all? Here is an idea strange enough to break your brain a little. Maybe you do not need to save the brain at all. Maybe you only need to save the map. Remember what a person truly is. Not the specific cells, not the water and the fat and the tissue. A person is a pattern, the exact web of connections wired across the brain. If that is true, then in theory, the pattern is the thing worth keeping, and the flesh is just the paper it happens to be written on. Follow that thought to its edge, and you arrive somewhere dizzying. If you could map every connection in a brain, every last thread of that impossibly vast web, you would hold a complete blueprint of a mind. Every memory, every habit, every corner of a personality captured as pure information, and with a perfect blueprint you would not need to revive the fragile original brain. You could rebuild the pattern somewhere new, in a fresh body perhaps, or inside a machine. This is the reason some efforts to freeze the brain do not even aim to wake it in the old way. They aim only to hold its structure perfectly still, well enough that a future age could scan it, read the entire map and reconstruct the mind from the plan. The frozen brain becomes not a sleeping patient waiting to thaw, but a book waiting to be read, its story ready to be copied into something new. For the sleeper ship, this rewrites the whole problem. Why send a delicate living mind across the stars at all, vulnerable to radiation and thawing and time? Why not send only the map? A perfectly preserved blueprint of a human mind carried safely across the dark and rebuilt on arrival in a body grown at the destination, or in a mind built from circuits. No wasting muscle, no dissolving bone, no brittle glass to crack, just information, the safest cargo there is, and a factory at the far end to bring it back to life. It sounds like the perfect escape. And it hides the deepest trap in this entire story, because suppose you rebuild a mind from a map. Suppose the new version wakes up with all your memories, your voice, your fears, your love of the same songs. It laughs at your jokes. It remembers your childhood. It is certain, completely certain that it is you. Is it? Or is it a stranger wearing your pattern, a fresh mind that only believes it is you because it carries a copy of your map? The original, the one who lay down to be scanned, is still there in the frozen glass or long gone. The one who wakes is a new thing built to match. They would feel like the same person from the inside, but from the outside you built a copy, and the copy is not the same being as the one who left. This is not a small worry. It cuts to the center of what survival even means, and it does not only haunt the map and the machine, it haunts every version of the frozen sleep, right down to the deepest and longest of them all. Because even if you keep the original brain, and freeze it into glass, and carry it 1,000 years, and somehow wake it whole, the same terrible question waits at the end. Who is it that opens their eyes? The question of who wakes up is so heavy that some dreamers refuse to touch it, and choose a completely different road to the stars. A road where nobody sleeps at all? Their idea sounds almost simple. If freezing a mind is so dangerous, so full of traps and horrors, then do not freeze anyone. Keep the crew awake and alive for the entire voyage. But the voyage lasts centuries, longer than any human life. So you do the one thing humans have always done to outlast time. You have children. This is the generation ship. Picture a vessel the size of a small world, a hollow city sailing between the stars, carrying not a frozen crew but a living community. The people who launch it will never see the destination. They will grow old and die on board. But before they do, they will raise children. Those children will grow up knowing only the ship, will have children of their own, and will pass away in their turn. Generation after generation, born and living and dying inside the same moving world, until at last, centuries later, a crew arrives at the distant star, and every one of them was born in flight. None of them ever touched the earth their ancestors left behind. It is an elegant escape. No deep cold, no wasting muscle or dissolving bone, no brittle glass to crack, no radiation soaking into a defenseless sleeper, no thaw that might stop a heart. The people stay warm and awake and human the whole way, and the awful question of identity never even arises, because nobody is stopped and restarted. Each person simply lives their one continuous life, from birth to death, aboard the ship. But trade one nightmare and you buy another. A generation ship condemns people who never chose the mission to spend their entire lives inside a metal shell. The children born in flight never asked to be born there. They will never feel wind or rain or open sky. They will live and die in corridors serving a goal chosen by ancestors they never met, aimed at a world they will never reach. They are handed a life sentence at birth for a crime that is simply existing at the wrong point in a very long trip. And a closed world sailing alone for centuries is a fragile thing. The community must never run out of food, air, or water. It must never lose the knowledge of how to run the ship. It must not fall into war with itself, or forget why it is travelling, or let its numbers shrink too far or swell too large. A single generation that fails, that fights, that forgets, could doom every generation that would have followed. A civilization in a bottle, holding itself together across a span longer than most nations on Earth have ever lasted. So both roads to the stars are haunted. The sleepers risk the horrors of the cold and the loss of the self. The generation ship risks the slow collapse of a tiny trapped society across the centuries. Freeze the mind or breed across the dark, neither is safe, neither is kind. And underneath both lies the same relentless question, the one this whole journey keeps circling back to. How long can a human mind in any form endure the deep? To find the true limit, we have to push the frozen sleeper all the way to the edge. Not months, not years, 1,000 years in the cold. And ask whether anything of the person could possibly still be waiting at the end. Push the frozen sleep to its absolute limit, and you reach a number that sounds like myth. 1,000 years, held in the deep cold, waiting to wake. On the surface, the physics allows it. Once a brain is turned to glass and cooled past 300 degrees below zero, its inner clock nearly stops. Molecules barely stir. The chemistry of decay grinds to a standstill so complete that time almost loses its grip. In that state, whether a brain waits 100 years or 10,000 makes little difference to the tissue itself. It simply holds, still and patient, outside the ordinary flow of time. 1,000-year sleep is not obviously impossible. It is in theory just a longer wait. But the longer the wait, the more two quiet enemies matter. The first is the storm we met before, the cosmic rain that never truly stops. Even a frozen brain, held perfectly still, cannot dodge the particles that pour through all of space. Over a single year, the damage is tiny. Over 1,000 years, those particles keep coming, one after another, slowly riddling even a glass brain with countless small wounds. The pattern, held so carefully in the cold, is nibbled at grain by grain across the centuries. Freeze a mind long enough, and time itself, carried on the back of radiation, may erase it anyway. The second enemy is us. 1,000-year sleep does not depend only on the sleeper. It depends on an unbroken chain of caretakers stretching across 1,000 years. Someone has to keep the cold going. Someone has to guard the machines, top up the tanks, protect the sleeper through every war, every collapse, every disaster and dark age that 1,000 years can bring. Think about how much falls apart in a single century. Now stack 10 of them. No human civilization has ever kept a single promise unbroken for 1,000 years. And a frozen mind is a promise that cannot survive even one broken link. Let the cold fail for a day, and the sleeper is lost forever. 1,000-year sleep, then, is a message in a bottle thrown across an ocean of time, trusting that hand after hand after hand will catch it and pass it on, faithfully, for longer than any story we have ever kept. It asks not only that the sleeper endure, but that everyone who comes after them stays loyal to a person they never met, across a gulf of centuries. That may be the most fragile part of the entire dream. And yet suppose, against all of it, that the chain holds. Suppose the cold never fails, the caretakers never falter, and the radiation is somehow held at bay. Suppose a mind truly waits 1,000 years in the glass, and then, gently, is warmed and brought back, whole, its pattern intact, its eyes opening on a world 1,000 years beyond the one it left. We still cannot escape the question that has shadowed us this whole way. The question no cold, and no machine and no 1,000 years can answer. When those eyes open after 1,000-year silence, is the mind behind them the same one that closed them? Or did the person who lay down die at the moment the brain went still and someone new, wearing their memories, wake in their place? You feel like a single, unbroken person, flowing smoothly from your past into your future. But that feeling may be the thing the sleeper ship quietly destroys. Think about what yourself actually is. Moment to moment, it feels like a stream, one continuous you, running from the child you were to the person reading this now, never once stopping. That unbroken flow is the deepest reason you feel like the same person you were yesterday. The stream never breaks, it only moves. Ordinary sleep does not frighten us because the stream barely pauses. Your brain keeps humming all night, dreaming, sorting, alive. You dip below the surface and rise again by morning, and the flow carries on. You trust without thinking that the person who wakes is the person who lay down, because nothing ever truly stopped. Now do something sleep never does. Stop the stream completely. Halt every flicker of activity in the brain. Freeze it into glass, silent and still, for 1,000 years. Nothing moving, nothing flowing. The stream does not slow. It ends. And then, 1,000 years later, you start it again from the frozen pattern left behind. Here is the knife. Is the new stream the same stream that stopped? Or is it a brand new one that simply picks up where the old left off, carrying the same memories, believing itself to be the same person, while the original you ended the moment the flow stopped forever? Two answers pull against each other, and no experiment can settle which is true. Maybe you are your pattern, and as long as the pattern survives and runs again, you survive. Sleep or freeze or 1,000 years be damned. Or maybe you are the unbroken thread of experience itself, and once that thread is truly cut, you are gone, no matter how perfect the copy that wakes in your place. The person who opens their eyes will have no doubt at all. They will feel completely, utterly themselves. They will remember lying down. They will remember their whole life. They will be certain the journey worked. But that certainty proves nothing. A perfect copy would feel exactly the same certainty and swear the same oath and be wrong. Push it further into true nightmare. If a mind is only a pattern and a pattern can be copied, then nothing stops you from waking two of them. Two people, opening their eyes in two bodies, each holding the same memories, each certain they are the one real you. Both would be right. Both would be wrong. The single thread you thought you were splits into two, and there is no fact of the matter about which one inherited your life. This is the wall that no cold can freeze and no machine can breach. Every other problem of the sleeper ship is, in the end, an engineering problem. Better shielding, better cooling, better anti-ice. But this one is not about the body at all. It is about the self, and whether the self is a thing that can be stopped and started, frozen and thawed, copied and carried, and still remain the same self. We do not know. We may never know. And there is one specific, brutal ending that takes all of this abstract dread and makes it suddenly, terribly real. The worst thing that can happen to a sleeper is not that they fail to wake. It is that they wake perfectly and find they are utterly alone. Imagine you survive it all. The cold, the radiation, the thaw, the 1,000 years. Your mind arrives whole, your eyes open, and there is no one there. This is the darkest ending the sleeper ship can write, and it is not death. Death would be a mercy compared to this. This is perfect survival into perfect solitude. Picture the ways it could happen. The others in their pods did not survive the waking. Their hearts stopped in the thaw, and you alone came through, opening your eyes onto a row of silent, still companions who will never rise. Or the lone guardian died somewhere in the long dark, and the machines drifted on without correction, and the ship sailed right past its target into the endless deep, and you woke to a window full of nothing but stars, no world in reach, no way to turn back. Or the ship arrived exactly where it was meant to, and the world waiting there was dead, an empty rock under a cold sun, nothing to greet you but silence and dust. In every version, the outcome is the same. You are awake, you are whole, you are sane, and you are the only conscious mind for trillions of miles with no one to speak to, no way home, and generations of the dead behind you. Everyone you ever knew turned to dust centuries before your eyes opened. The mission that carried you here is finished one way or another, and there is nothing left for the person it delivered. The cruelest form of it does not even let you die soon. The ship still works, the air still flows, the machines still feed you, and so you live. You go on, awake and alone, in a metal shell adrift in the dark, for the rest of a natural life. Years of it. Nothing to do but remember a world that is gone and wait for an end that will not hurry. a mind that endured everything, only to be handed the one thing no human being was ever built to survive: complete and permanent solitude. We started this whole journey worried that the mind might not last the trip, that the cold might stop it, or the radiation might scramble it, or the isolation might break it before the destination ever came. But here is a fate where the mind lasts perfectly, arrives intact, works exactly as designed, and still meets a horror worse than any failure. Because a mind is not made to be the last one. A mind is made for other minds. Take those away completely, forever, and even a perfectly preserved self has nowhere left to stand. So we arrive, at last, back at the question we began with, standing at the foot of that rocket a lifetime ago. We have followed the sleeper through the wasting of the body, the dissolving of the bone, the storm of radiation, the loneliness of the watch, the loss of time, the glass and the thaw, the copy and the 1,000-year cold, the empty ship at the end of everything. Now we can finally ask it, and mean the full weight of it. How long could a human mind truly survive a sleeper ship? And when it finally opens its eyes, would there be anything human left inside? We began with a body strapped to a rocket, afraid it would fall apart in the dark. We end somewhere far stranger, unsure whether the mind that arrives is a person at all. Look back at everything we found. The body, it turns out, might be pushed further than we ever feared. The cold that seemed so deadly may double as a shield, softening the storm of radiation while the traveller sleeps. Machines could feed the still form, turn it, stir its blood, hold it on the razor's edge for years. The monster of ice might be beaten by turning the brain to glass. Step by step, the physical impossibilities start to look like problems we could one distant day solve. The body was never the true frontier. The mind was, because a mind is not a piece of cargo. It is a living stream of memory and feeling and self, tied to a time, tied to other people, tied to an unbroken thread of experience it may not survive being cut. And every part of the voyage pulls at that thread. The radiation that quietly rewrites who you are, the isolation that frays the watcher until they no longer know themselves, the loss of time so complete you cannot say how long you have lived, the waking that might start a new stream in place of the old, the empty ship that could hand a perfect sane mind the one thing it cannot bear. So the honest answer to our question is a hard one. A mind might survive the journey while the person does not. A traveller could arrive breathing, warm, eyes open, and still be hollowed out, changed by the cosmic fire, unmoored from every world they knew, a stranger to their own past, uncertain whether they are the one who left or only a copy who inherited the memories, alive and yet no longer quite themselves. The real measure of a sleeper ship, then, was never how cold we could make a brain, or how long we could hold the freeze, or how many miles we could cross. The real measure is whether the thing that walks off the ship at the far end is still one of us, still a person, still human in the way that word truly means, carrying not just a pattern of memories but a self that survived the crossing whole. Maybe it can be done. Maybe there is a way to slow a body, shield a mind, and carry a true, unbroken person across an ocean of years and wake them gently on a distant shore, still themselves, ready to walk out under a new sun. Maybe the first traveller to prove it has not yet been born, or maybe the strength to endure that much dark and stay whole is already something we carry, quietly, waiting for the day we finally need it. We reach for the stars because we cannot help ourselves, and the sleeper ship is the strangest reach of all, a gamble not just with our bodies, but with the very thread of who we are. The distance can be crossed, the body can be slowed, the cold can be held. The only thing we still do not know is whether the mind that closes its eyes at launch is the same one that opens them at the end. And until someone makes that crossing and tells us what they found on the other side, that question waits out there in the dark, patient as the stars.